All right, Doc. You got the green light. But mess up, and there'll be hell to pay.
Jacob nodded, realizing it was all the green light he was going to get. He then turned to Lillian, who had been steering clear of the whole mess.
Lillian, you in? Can you assist me?
Lillian wasn't expecting to be yanked into the action, but seeing the steely resolve in Jacob's eyes, she just gritted her teeth and gave a quick nod. But as Jacob began wheeling Brandon towards the operating room, Jonathan lunged out and grabbed the stretcher.
I always knew you had a knack for idiocy, Jacob, but seriously, haven't you learned? We need the family's consent before we start poking around.
Move it. At least this dude's doing something. You haven't lifted a finger since you showed up.
The driver angrily shoved Jonathan aside. He was desperate, and Jonathan was just making things harder for his only hope. Ignoring them both, Jacob pushed on, shoving Brandon into the OR and slamming the door shut. The injuries were gnarly, and he couldn't afford any distractions.
All right, clothes first.
Jacob instructed Lillian, already scrubbing his hands in the sink. He reached into his pocket and pulled out a rolled-up leather pouch. Unfurling it, he revealed a dazzling array of silver acupuncture needles, all different sizes, glinting under the harsh OR lights. Some were as thin as a hair, others thicker, but all wickedly sharp. These needles were his family's legacy. Ever since his grandpa schooled him on how to use them properly, they'd been his constant companions. Taking a deep breath to steady his nerves, Jacob went to work. He moved with practiced ease, and in a few short minutes, 18 silver needles were strategically placed on various pressure points all over Brandon's body. Just as he finished, the big cheese himself, Director Hernandez, burst into the room, flanked by Dr. Connor and Dr. Barrett. Hot on their heels was another group, led by a pissed older man in a fancy suit.
What the fuck is going on here? Where's my son?
This was Gavin Feliciano, CEO of Terrell Corporation, a bigwig with a bigger ego. His wife Susan followed anxiously behind, flanked by a squad of goons who looked like they could bench press a car.
Mr. Feliciano, welcome. Glad you could make it.
Director Hernandez plastered a nervous grin on his face as the big man walked in, but Gavin didn't waste any time with pleasantries. He cracked Hernandez one across the face with a loud slap, making the director flinch like a scared rabbit. Hernandez's face burned with a mix of shame and fury, but Hernandez knew better than to mess with Gavin.
Sorry, Mr. Feliciano. As director of this hospital, I can assure you our doctors are top-notch. Your son's in good hands with Dr. Connor here.
Quite the yapping, and tell me where the fuck is my son?
Where's the patient currently?
Trying to defuse the situation, Director Hernandez turned to Jonathan, who was fidgeting nervously, wishing the floor would just swallow him up.
He's in surgery, sir. You see, it was a critical situation, so we kinda had to jump the gun a bit.
And who exactly is performing the surgery?
It's Dr. Jacob Ye, sir.
Dr. Ye?
Director Hernandez furrowed his brow. He didn't recognize that name on his staff list. Beside him, Dr. Barrett's face darkened considerably.
Who in the world is that? What kind of butcher are you letting operate on my son?
Brandon's mother, Susan, panicked upon seeing Director Hernandez's grave expression. Hernandez hesitated, but before he could respond, Dr. Barrett stepped forward, practically shouting,
"This is insane! That kid's barely out of diapers, let alone qualified to hold a scalpel. There's no way he's operating on Brandon."
An intern? Are you fucking kidding me? Is this hospital some kind of clown college? Or are you so understaffed that you're throwing rookies at my son? He just got creamed in a car wreck, and you want some greenhorn tinkering around inside him?
What in Sam Hill is going on here? My son doesn't get operated on by some fresh-faced newbie. If this turns into a medical malpractice montage, this hospital will be singing the blues in court for a decade.
Desperate for a life raft, Hernandez pivoted to Dr. Jonathan.
Where's the damn diagnosis report? Maybe it's not as dire as we think.
Jonathan shuffled the folder containing the report towards Dr. Connor. As the lead surgeon scanned it, his face drained of color. Brandon's injuries were far worse than anyone anticipated. Even with his expertise, Dr. Connor harbored serious doubts about the young man's chances. Apparently this intern, Dr. Ye, was either a complete maverick or a secret medical prodigy.
Dr. Connor, how bad is it?
Mr. Feliciano, your son's injuries are extensive.
Normally Connor would be prepping the family for the worst-case scenario. But staring down the hospital's biggest donor, a man who could buy and sell them all twice over, he choked back the truth. Gavin's jaw clenched, but Susan wasn't done yet.
Extensive? You call that an answer? Get in there and fix him. What's the point of all those fancy machines you have here if they're just collecting dust? You mess up, and believe me, you'll all be singing a different tune.
Dr. Connor's face darkened further. He was a leading medical authority in Oakdale City, but his stellar reputation wouldn't survive the media firestorm that would erupt if Brandon Feliciano died on his operating table under the care of an intern. The pressure was on, and it was suffocating. Meanwhile, in the operating room, Lillian couldn't believe what was happening right in front of her eyes.
What the heck did you do, Jacob?
Much to Lillian's surprise, whatever Jacob had done worked like magic as the patient's condition looked stable. At least that's what the machines attached to his body were suggesting.
Congratulations, Lillian. You're the first to witness my magic. Now, shall we show the world our achievement?
Jacob winked at Lillian, who could only shake her head with a smile at his playfulness. Jacob stumbled out of the OR, feeling like he'd run a marathon uphill in a snowstorm. Using his ancient healing techniques had drained him, both physically and mentally. All he craved was a bed, a shower, and a coma. But first, he had to face the Felicianos and the hospital brass, a gauntlet more intimidating than any surgery. As Jacob looked around him, he was greeted with a tableau of misery. Susan Feliciano, stiletto heels clicking a furious rhythm, paced like a caged tiger. Gavin, his face thunderous, stood next to a tight-lipped Dr. Connor. Even Director Hernandez looked like he'd swallowed a lemon.
Brandon is critical, but stable for now. We need to keep him under close observation. And please, don't mess with those acupuncture needles I put in. They're kinda key right now.
Susan didn't seem to hear anything he said, and she rushed toward him in a panic.
Who the fuck are you? If you messed with my son, I swear you'll be left with nothing but unemployment.
Jacob understood her fear, but her aggression rankled. Brandon had been a hair's breadth from lights out when he arrived. Without Jacob's unorthodox intervention, he wouldn't have lived to see his family. Sure, Jacob had bent every hospital rule imaginable, but he'd also saved the life of a major donor's son.
As I said, your son's all right. As all right as he can be, given the circumstances.
You better be talking gospel, fuckface, or I'll have you strung up on a malpractice lawsuit.
Susan whirled around in a fury and jabbed a finger at Director Hernandez.
I never want to see this dipshit again. Get him the fuck out of here!
Gavin, a man who could make glaciers sweat, remained silent for now, but his icy glare as he entered the OR was enough to curdle milk. Dr. Connor followed on his heels. Dr. Barrett, a bulldog of a man, rounded on Jacob.
Who died and made you chief surgeon intern? You know who Brandon Feliciano is, right? Messing with a VIP like that can land you in a world of trouble. You better hope he pulls through, because if he doesn't, you'll be the one needing surgery to separate your backside from your job.
Look, he's stable now. Whatever happens, the buck stops with me. You don't need to lose sleep over it.
Stable? Even Dr. Connor might not be able to pull this off. And you're a wide-eyed intern. Don't you have a shred of doubt about your abilities?
Look, I don't care who you are, boy. I want you to pack up your things and leave this hospital for good.
Fire me if you have to, but give me a real reason.
A real reason? You waltzed into surgery and poked around a billionaire's son without a license or a single lick of real training. Need I say more?
Last I checked, doctors take an oath to help people. Mr. Feliciano was about to become a ghost when they wheeled him in here. Nobody else was around who could do anything. I figured the least I could do was buy him some time until the cavalry arrived.
Sure as shootin', you were very sure. Even if you were Miss Cleo with a crystal ball, it's not your call. You're an intern, green as week old lettuce. The OR is off limits to the likes of you. Now get lost.
Look, I'm not asking for a medal here, but I'm not going to take the blame for saving a life when nobody else lifted a finger. This hospital is more concerned with the size of a patient's bank account than their actual health. It's a clown show, and I don't want to be part of it anymore.
Jacob ripped his ID lanyard off his neck and flung it on the counter like a discarded playing card.
Consider this my resignation. You can shove your fancy equipment and bottomless greed straight up your ass.
Jacob turned to leave, but then suddenly stopped in this track.
Oh, and before I make my grand exit, I've got a little something for the bullies.
Before anyone could even blink, Jacob snatched up a water bottle from a nearby table and, in one swift motion, drenched Jonathan's head. Water cascaded down his face, soaking his designer shirt and making the room gasp in surprise.
What the heck, Jacob? Have you completely lost your mind?
Ignoring Jonathan's outburst, Jacob shifted his gaze to Barrett, a devilish grin spreading across his face. Barrett's eyes widened in fear as he started to backpedal, looking around desperately for an escape route.
Security! Someone get security! This psycho is...
But Barrett's cry for help was abruptly silenced when Jacob delivered a swift kick to his gut, sending him tumbling under the table with a thud. The room erupted in gasps and whispers, everyone too shocked to react.
You like to operate under the table, Barrett? Well, why don't you get comfortable down there?
With that, Jacob spun on his heel and stormed out, leaving the doctor sputtering with fury in his wake. In the recovery room, Dr. Connor stared at the patient in astonishment. As far as the vital sign monitors were concerned, Brandon was indeed stable. There was even a hint of healthy color on his face. Brandon's broken legs were secured with splints that looked like they were done by a pro, and his breathing was smooth and easy, which meant his punctured lung was somehow under control too. Dr. Connor couldn't even begin to guess how Jacob pulled off this medical magic trick.
So how's my boy doing?
He should be fine. Honestly, the intern did a fantastic job. Seriously impressive stuff.
Is my baby gonna be all right? No permanent damage, right?
The treatment seems sound, albeit unorthodox. His current condition looks good, so I wouldn't expect long-term complications.
Wouldn't expect? I need a straight fucking answer, not a guessing game. We donate millions to this hospital every year. And for what? So you dumbasses can play charades with my son's life?
Mrs. Feliciano, Brandon's injuries were severe. It'll take time for a full recovery. We'll monitor him closely and give you a more definitive answer soon.
Seething with anger, Susan clasped her hands around Dr. Connor's neck, her long nails digging into his skin. Her eyes burned with fury as she tightened her grip, her knuckles turning white.
Is that all you got, you dumb fuck? You can all bet your asses I'll make you pay for this. Especially that little son of a bitch, Jacob.
The goddamn money you donate is for charity. What, you think you can buy a life like it's a fancy car? Let's cut the bullshit, shall we? It's for your fucking PR and a fat tax write-off. You don't give a damn about healing, do you? Every cent goes to treatment and keeping this hospital running. We doctors bust our asses to save lives, and your blood money can't change that. You can't bribe death, Mrs. Feliciano, no matter how deep your pockets are.
Susan's jaw dropped, her face a mask of shock and indignation. She stumbled back, clutching her designer purse like a shield.
Find another sucker to treat your precious boy. I won't be your puppet, dancing to the tune of your checkbook.
He spat the words like venom, storming out without a backward glance. The door slammed behind him, the sound echoing through the sterile hallway. Gavin's eyes blazed with fury as he glared at Susan, his fists clenched at his sides. Shortly afterward, Dr. Barrett came into the room to take a look at Brandon's injuries.
Well, the kid's fine now. No need to worry. He'll come to his senses soon.
Thank God. We owe you, Doc.
You're too kind. It's all part of the job. Mr. and Mrs. Feliciano, please get some rest. I'll transfer your son to a private room.
Gavin nodded and finally left the room with Susan and their bodyguards in tow. Once the Felicianos had taken their leave, Jonathan entered the room. As Dr. Barrett was about to order Jonathan to have Brandon transferred, he noticed the shining silver needles strategically placed around the injured man's body.
What in God's name is this voodoo bullshit? Acupuncture? What's next? Chicken bones and magic spells. Get these damn needles out before I lose my mind.
But sir, Jacob said the needles are crucial for Gukt.
Did I fucking stutter? Who's the surgeon here? Me or that arrogant little prick? I swear, if I hear one more word about Jacob and his magic needles, I'll stick them somewhere very uncomfortable.
Jonathan, cowed by the outburst, removed the needles with trembling hands, each tiny clink as they hit the tray feeling like a death knell. Before Dr. Barrett could spend too much time indulging his satisfaction, he heard a shrill alarm sounding from the monitoring equipment. SFX, machine starts blaring alarmingly. When he turned around to look at the source of the noise, he nearly jumped out of his skin. Brandon's heartbeat accelerated and his blood pressure soared. He seemed to have difficulty breathing.
Shit! What the hell is happening? Jonathan, what the fuck did you do?
What are you yelling at me for? You're the one who told me to pull out the needles.
Dr. Barrett quickly scrambled out of the door and thanked his lucky stars that Dr. Connor hadn't gone home for the night. He could only gasp out Brandon's name as he tried to catch his breath when he found Dr. Connor. The two of them sprinted back to the room.
Where the hell are the needles? Don't tell me you were stupid enough to...
We pulled them out.
You incompetent moron! Those needles were keeping him alive. What part of don't touch them didn't penetrate your thick skull?
Suddenly, Gavin and Susan rushed in, faces twisted with fear and rage. The beeping of the machines seemed to grow louder, more insistent.
It wasn't me. Jonathan did it. He's the one you should be yelling at.
Bullshit. You ordered me to. Don't you dare try to pin this on me.
My baby! What have you done to my baby, you fucking quack? I'll ruin you, all of you.
No. Let's not get ahead of ourselves. Dr. Connor, can't we just stick them back in?
It's not that simple. Acupuncture isn't some game of pin the tail on the donkey. It's a delicate art based on the patient's illness, overall health, and energy pathways. One wrong move and we could kill him. Do you want that on your conscience, Barrett?
You fucking piece of shit! How dare you gamble with my son's life!
Susan lunged at Dr. Barrett like a rabid animal, her manicured nails clawing for his eyes.
If my baby dies, I'll fucking end you! I'll tear you apart with my bare hands! You'll wish you'd never been born, you worthless excuse of a doctor!
Dr. Barrett wailed like a stuck pig as Susan attacked, drawing blood from his face. Gavin, ever the cold-blooded CEO, remained eerily calm despite the chaos unfolding before him.
That's enough, Susan. Dr. Connor, please, save my boy. He's all I have in this godforsaken world. I'll give you anything. Money, power, whatever you want. Just don't let him die.
Connor examined the needle, his face grim. He saw that it was nearly as fine as a strand of hair. He said with a sigh,
I can't, I'm sorry. It's like trying to perform brain surgery with a sledgehammer. We need that damn intern or your kid's as good as dead. I hate to admit it, but he might be our only hope.
Gavin's face darkened, a storm brewing in his eyes. He rushed out of the room and grabbed one of the guards by the collar.
Chuck, take the others and find that intern now! Turn the whole hospital upside down. I don't care what it takes. Drag him here, kicking and screaming if you have to.
Barrett and Jonathan came outside at that moment. Gavin turned to Barrett and grabbed his neck, his gaze promising violence that made the doctor shrink back in terror.
If my son dies because of your fuck-up, Barrett, I'll make sure you never practice again. Hell, you'll be lucky if you can wipe your own ass when I'm done with you. I'll bury you so deep in lawsuits and scandals, your grandchildren will feel the fallout.
Wait, Mr. Feliciano, please. The intern, Jacob Ye. He's from Oakdale Medical University. He's probably headed there. That's all I know, I swear.
Pray we find him in time, you spineless worm, or I'll destroy everything you hold dear. Your career, your reputation, your family. Nothing will be safe from my wrath.
Barrett collapsed, a puddle of sweat and fear, as Gavin stormed out behind his guards. After Jacob had collected his few belongings from the employee lockers, he headed to the bus stop in front of the hospital and took the last bus back to campus. In some ways, it was a relief to know that he wouldn't have to go back to the hospital anymore, especially since everybody there seemed to hate him. Just as Jacob got off the bus and walked toward the school gate, he heard the roar of a car engine behind him. A black car stopped short right next to him, and a couple of large men jumped out.
Get in the car, kid. Boss wants you. This isn't a request.
Piss off. I'm done with that hellhole. Find someone else to be your punching bag. Also, didn't you hear the doctors? I'm not allowed back. I'm just an intern.
Mrs. Feliciano said to bring you back even if we have to tie and gag you. Don't make this ugly. We can do this the easy way or the hard way, your choice.
Jacob was furious. His eyes flashed dangerously, a hint of something otherworldly gleaming in their depths.
Try me, you steroid-pumped gorilla. I'm not some pushover intern you can bully. You have no idea who you're dealing with.
The guard lunged, but Jacob moved like lightning. A sickening crack echoed as the man's wrist bent unnaturally. SFX, bone-cracking, agonized scream.
Ah! My fucking hand! You little shit! What the hell did you do to me?
The other guards charged, faces contorted with rage, their training kicking in as they moved to subdue Jacob.
You want to dance? Let's dance, assholes.
In a blur of motion, Jacob incapacitated each guard with terrifying precision. Jacob stepped forward and grabbed one man's right hand, and with a gentle twist, the bodyguard screamed as his arm hung uselessly at his side. His other companions suffered the same fate when Jacob targeted their pressure points. Bodies hit the ground, accompanied by screams of pain and disbelief.
Next time, bring real fighters. Or better yet, learn some fucking manners. I'm not your puppet to order around. Tell the Felicianos if they want my help, they can ask nicely. If they can find me.